See, you have to understand the enemy before you want to destroy it or you want to get rid of it. And again, we can't get rid of it in its entirety, but government is something we can indeed get rid of because it does not exist. It is an illusion of the mind. We can't get rid of evil. We can't get rid of bad. There's always going to be a level of that to which many people are going to have, their versions of that. But we can seek out what is the objective wrong, what is the objective right, and then we can determine from the natural law that the man's law is not of the objective right, and it is inherently immoral because of the backed violence, because of the push above human life as if they are God. And so you have here, quote, when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. A quote by Thomas Jefferson, and this is exactly it, is this fight between anarchy and statism has always existed. People wanting to be free and people wanting to be slaves. And that is essentially what it is, because anarchy is ultimate freedom and statism is ultimate slavery. To the very essence of you're following someone's belief, and you're trapped in this belief system that this person should rule over your life. That is statism, whereas anarchy is this idea that you shouldn't have anybody rule over your life, but you can still live in peaceful coexistence. And so if the people fear the government, if they fear the statism, but they don't have fear, right? There is tyranny when people fear the government, because people shouldn't have fear, right? But when the government fears the people, now the government's in fear for great reason because they've created much of the fear. Now the people are standing up saying, I don't want to fear anymore, I want to be in a state of love. Now there is liberty because the people, which are the ones that give the rule to the government, are those who are choosing, I want my natural law here manifesting in its work so that love may manifest in its work and not fear. And fear is not the overbearing ruling over our lives. The limits are not the overbearing rulings over our lives. Moving with this all, quote, to learn you have to listen, to improve you have to try, a quote by Thomas Jefferson. So to learn we can listen to the messages that nature has to give us, right? And that's how we learn. The best teacher, the best physician, we know. But to improve, we have to try, we have to put effort, we have to put action into the things that we learn, into the things that we know, into the things that we say. So to actually improve, right, we have to try. And to get the desired result that we want, we have to try. But at least we're trying. Any action is action. If we want to improve, we have to prove a point. For even this, quote, it is error alone which needs the support of government. Truth can stand by itself, a quote by Thomas Jefferson. So why can't we, stand by ourselves in support of one another, not in support of some foreign entity that we don't know of, very few people, of an illusion that doesn't exist and goes against all that is natural and of nature? And this is the reason why they suppress that knowledge of nature from you. And they don't want it out in the public is because it would eliminate their control because of our belief system, okay, that says that we do not support the government. We do not believe in this illusion. That is what it is. For if we stand for right and we say that we believe in the right and that we want right, the right objective moral truth, then it only makes sense that we don't believe in government, because it is of the wrong. It is of the man's law. So that's why government feeds on error, because it is based on illusion. It is based on wrong. So by doing wrong, by wanting wrong, by not following natural law in the way of right, we are supporting government. We're supporting forces like that to rise where death, where harm can manifest itself, because truth is not in the stand. It is not represented by itself as people are to do themselves with their own expression, with their own creativity. For the truth, it has no error, right? But government, what we do of man's law, has error because it's consequences. We consider it error. It's bad consequences, things that are not good that happen through time because of karma, because it is of the wrong according to natural law. So that's why we understand what government is, that it is mind control, and that we don't want to be a part of that. If we don't want to be a part of it, or if we want to do the right thing, then we simply, by us wanting to be good and right, don't believe in government. And I had better ways to word that the first time, but that's what happens when you have to repeat it 4 times because the recording does not work right. But okay, we're back on track. Quote, "He who knows best knows how little he knows." A quote by Thomas Jefferson. We saw how this is also literally the same quote that we saw like 2 times before. Now, is it a coincidence? Maybe did they get some inspiration from the same ancients? I think they did, actually. I think that they got a lot of their philosophy from the past because it helps teach us for the future. And I think that's really where it's coming from here. And that's why I'm reminding you of our past so we can move on for a new future again. Because just like what Thomas Jefferson and George Washington did, we are creating a whole new existent playing field that has not existed before with this movement. So we must know how little we actually know if we want to have a good moral ground and not root this life in ego, which the governments and power systems of man's law left-brain dominance has. Quote, "The end of democracy and the defeat of the American Revolution will occur when government falls into the hands of lending institutions and moneyed corporations." A quote by Thomas Jefferson. This cannot be any more true of our current condition, being that, like I said, we have a lot of banks that are in control of the nation, being that they are in control of the money supply. That's exactly what he's saying here, the defeat of the American Revolution. Because how is it American when you have other countries that particularly run the money supply are often leading what's happening here through the Federal Reserve and international monetary funds? This is not a system that was originally thought out to be created by Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. From what I saw, they did not create the Federal Reserve. They did not intend for an international body like that. They did not intend for technology. So now we have to keep in mind all those things that do now exist. Quote, "The man who reads nothing is more educated than the one who reads nothing but newspapers." A quote by Thomas Jefferson, also representing this idea of fake news that has risen up in recent times, because there is a lot out there that you could believe that isn't necessarily true. But as we know, the best teacher, as the best physician, as all things, is nature. So that's where you're going to get your education from. And the most natural education is also from your parents, by the way, because your parents are to help guide you, especially if you are younger or of lower consciousness naturally, because you are to attain a higher consciousness, and through your parents, through your creative works, through your imagination that you are given greatly as a kid. This is the great nurturing ability of nature itself. People want to say nature versus nurture. They're one and the same, folks. They work with each other. They're both there for great reason and in support for each other. So, reading nothing? Well, we can still read. People say reading makes you smart, but what are you reading? What are you listening to? Where are you putting your focus? Again, that's what matters. Where are you putting your heart? Where are you putting your mind? Are you putting it in something that doesn't really exist? Are you putting it in something that is of a denatured reality? Are you putting it in something that is based in man's law or objective wrong? Is it based in something that's immoral or backed by violence? Quote, "The earth belongs always to the living generation. Every constitution, then, and every law naturally expires at the end of 19 years. A quote by Thomas Jefferson again. And we see here that the earth belongs always to the living generation, saying that nothing can truly last for all its time. So that's why he's saying every constitution then and every law naturally expires. Okay, so what he's saying, and what he's saying by generation, every 19 years, if you want to look at centuries and then generations and so forth. So what he's kind of like insinuating here is that the Constitution must change or live with those of the living body of that time. So he knew that things would change in time. So if we are to apply universal and timeless principles, we probably want to talk about the things that are universal, the things that are eternal. And the Constitution had much influence, it seems to be, as we know from our investigations and other works that I've shared, based on natural law. And it was still, though, a model based in government, in having that government existent and always to be obeyed still. However, they just always talked about keeping that government limited. There was always an idea of keeping it limited. But is there any abidance to natural law that talks about limiting government? Did we not know that there would turn into other countries affecting us? Or did we not know that technology would soon cause our interference with this limitation of government? We have to keep those things in mind. In the earth itself, how does it keep itself maintained? How do people themselves express their consciousness without being limited? And then employers and international corporations getting involved. These are questions to ask, and so it's a lot for one man of any time, especially back then, where we couldn't observe all this in its works. As we see now is the best time to learn. So you can't blame these people if they did not know it all, and they definitely had some faults of their own. Okay, so you have to understand that nobody is perfect, and as we know, nobody knows it all. Nobody knows the entire law, but natural law is something that has been taken over hundreds of thousands of years and into the consideration of more recent governments like the United States of America for the great reason of freeing the public as much as they can. But if we believe that we can free the public more than ever through doing what is right more than ever, then we shall grasp that opportunity, and if we have a blueprint to do so, we should likely follow it. And that's not just speaking on behalf of myself, it's speaking on the many people who have studied this intensely in different ways, okay? There's many different people who are among this. I'm not the only one. Quote, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." Okay, patriots and tyrants, okay? So that's said by Thomas Jefferson again, saying that the blood of patriots and tyrants, because the patriots are the ones that are obeying those leaders, whether they're good, whether they're bad, it doesn't matter. It's they're obeying. So doesn't mean we start creating violence, because that could be insinuated here with blood, but what he's saying is that the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time by eliminating the source of the problems, eliminating the problem, so that way freedom can manifest, which, as we know, freedom, by limited by the nature of the government, is then taken away. So if we eliminate the limits of freedom itself, which could be through these individuals that many people presume over their lives, then yes, we are restoring freedom, because we're eliminating that belief system that held them in place, which we like to call statism. Quote, "Experience hath shown that even under the best forms of government, those entrusted with power have in time and by slow operations perverted it into tyranny." A quote by Thomas Jefferson. Okay, so it's funny because we come to similar understandings that through time things could still get bad. But the problem is, he's saying the best forms of government. Perhaps the best thing was to say there was all forms of government, under the all forms of government, because they tried to make the United States the best form of government, right? Because they were the ones that wrote the law, they were the ones that wrote the Constitution, even though the Constitution was just talking about our natural laws, okay, and it just got added on to with some stuff that didn't really need to be written down, and that belief that it needed to be written down was actually the problem itself. Okay, that is the very thing that we're dealing with. So he's saying experience has shown, and what he means by that is that we've learned through history, we've learned through the past. Okay, so the best forms of government, even entrusted with power, have in time slowed operations, perverted into tyranny. Entrusted with power, what does that mean? That means statism. That means believing in the powers that be. Just believing that they can always help you, believing that they always have the solution to your problems. That is what he's talking about here. is having that entrusted with power. So there's a level of self-sustainability you must be, even if you were to have the best form of government, in order to keep that government system with low control. Right? But if the government is in its very nature to control, it's kind of counterintuitive, don't you think, to talk about people having their own self-control and then have a system over them that is supposed to control? So what's the point of that government? And then people say, well, it's to protect your natural rights. Well, it's to protect your natural rights, but it's not in alignment with natural law. So do we need to understand that? Because if we understand natural law, we understand things like the non-aggression principle and the golden rule, then we understand that we actually don't need those systems in place to be basically coexisting in peace. And that's all that it comes down to, right? Is this self-sustainability through holding each other accountable, through expressing our humanity as we ought to do, and then through such, naturally, tyranny cannot exist because we are being as we ought to be. Tyranny, by definition, you may see as dehumanizing, as denaturing, as something that has grown too out of control itself, despite having control of others. Do you see what I mean? They are denatured in their nature. So they lack control of themselves, and they seek it in others, so they control others. Meanwhile, this is the shadow effect at work again, and that's the reflection of tyranny, which by its very definition, like I said, it is this denaturing, to which by their operations, slow operations, a little at a time, they can edge out your freedoms with limitations. And with this idea of control, it is also said by this quote, it is neither wealth nor splendor, so not abundance, not materialistic stuff, okay? And he says, but tranquility and occupation, which gives you happiness. A quote by Thomas Jefferson, saying tranquility, which is peace in many regards, and occupation, self-control, because he's talking about you, what gives you happiness, which is the ultimate health, right? Which is the ultimate ultimatum of all ultimates, right? It's you want to live a happy life. You just want to live your life. You want to live as you ought to do. This is the idea of occupying the life that you have, having control over yourself, and then freeing yourself to the world that you belong in because you love that world and you are willing to release yourself to that world because you love it. But the system we have now, you don't love it, but you release your soul, you release your whole body toward it. And for what? And for what? You're not getting anything back, really, of worth. You're getting material, you're getting imitation. That's what you're getting. You're getting illusion back because you're believing in the illusion. So you're not getting anything real. You're not getting anything happy. You're not getting anything true or of truth, which is why it is of wrong, which is why it is of something that you need to get over with yourself. It is a mental transformation. It's a mental process that is, in many ways, destructive because of all those boundaries you have to take down to reach peace, right? So like war to attain peace is this idea, right? But no, it's peace to attain peace. Through other people talking, through human consciousness and willpower. That has nothing to do with war. War is not an option. Okay, the war is an inner war. It's always an inner war. The reason why people go to war externally is because they have a war internally. They can't control themselves again, so they seek it in other people. This is an internal warfare that is going on. We want to push it and point the fingers at other people, but in reality we got to point right at ourselves. We need to occupy our mind and our body and our soul if we want to achieve our self-control and over our own lives. That brings us to this quote, I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. A quote by Thomas Jefferson. This has gotten quite famous over the years, as especially in the anarchist movement, which people are holding each other accountable to as to what anarchy really means, as to opposed to the Bitcoin anarchy, as opposed to the leftist anarchy, as opposed to the this weird forms of anarchy which has nothing to do with no rulers. It just has to do with causing actual chaos as much as possible and not even having reason over their actions. So, you have to discern this anarchy from that anarchy, which is why we're better off just sticking with the term nature. And it's not a mask for anarchy. Nature is the answer. You can say nature is the anarchy is another way to put it, but I think it's better to say it as an answer because there's always questions to be made. There's always self-accountability to be made. You're not living in anarchy. You're already free as it is. So there must be a seeking. There must be always a seeking toward which is nature, which is what is right, what is natural, what is of the natural law. So to me, it's more of a better, more perfect word to describe than better, more perfect world that we ought to live in. And so, when he says dangerous freedom, it's because freedom has its dangers, right? We want to live amongst the good and the bad and embrace it and have those challenges to overcome and become our best selves. That's how we become our best selves, is being faced by this and that and allowing karma to arise and allowing trial and error to happen, allowing cause and effect to be more clear to us so we know exactly what's going on. And then it says over peaceful slavery, because slavery, we like it because it gives us peace, it gives us security, but meanwhile we're slaves to the system and giving our power away to somebody else. And that's the problem, is why do you want to be a slave when it is against not only your world and the world that we're supposed to live in, but it's peaceful in a way that it's not supposed to be, because there is supposed to be good and bad, so we can understand the difference between the two objectively as there is, so we can learn from the two and become better than we may ever be. And here you see the quote by James Madison, quote, "What is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature?" Okay, so he asked this as a question. What is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? So what he's saying here, is from what we are doing, our belief system, the reflections on human nature, our belief system is setting afoot what this government is created from. If we are ignorant, our government is likely highly ignorant and doesn't care. Right? And if it especially sees that we're ignorant, especially of their control and our role of our having natural human rights, then they're going to probably use that to the advantage. The ones who do see that, oh, okay, we can use that to our advantage, and it'll only help my own environment, my own self, and they stick themselves of the ego because they don't care about the rest of the masses because they feel like they can never attain the truth, and if they did, they wouldn't use it responsibly, for example. So you have to have faith in yourself, and that's why I am here to help try to give you that enlightenment of information, but I'm not the source of that. Nature is. And nature is not necessarily human nature, but what he's saying here, reflections on human nature. What you believe is what you become, is what you create. Reflections on what people are generally believing, what people are generally doing. It's going to reflect into the government that is created. And so he's saying government is the greatest of all reflections of human nature, because everybody's putting their greatest reflections into this system because they believe so much in it and they know change has to happen, but they don't think change can happen without a government. And that's the problem, is we have to open up the potential that, yeah, we can actually create change without government, folks. It's actually possible. And that's actually where you're going to create the most change, and that's actually where you're going to create the most desirable change in your own personal lives and elsewhere. So that's the point here, is where you feel like you have this obligation for change and you want change, but you're looking in a direction that, although is right and right, you can't just make a wrong into a right. That does not happen. A wrong is a wrong, a right is a right. Okay, that's why we are losing our rights. And to talk about this idea of big government, shall we not do anything to take control? Quote, a government big enough to give you everything you want is strong enough to take everything you have. A quote by Thomas Jefferson. If you don't think medicine and health isn't a big part of this, which, I mean, for goodness sake, almost every commercial is about health, and that's almost one of the biggest things we spend money on other than war itself, you see this. Quote, if people let the government decide what foods they eat and what medicines they take, their bodies will soon be in a sorry state, as are the souls of those who live under tyranny. By Thomas Jefferson. If it doesn't say better than the self, I don't know what does, because I'm a health coach, I'm in the health field, but yet I'm promoting this idea of self-control from the government. Yeah, it's because that is actually going to be the number one healing thing for you, is realizing that self-power you have to take control of what you eat and what you do, both. Not one or the other, but both. So reach a complete whole body mind approach to the control of the life that you want. So that way you may steer it in a direction that you want and you get what you want of the life that you were given. This is just simply using your human consciousness power, as we've talked about. So say, when he's comparing this idea that this big pharma medical tyranny is happening, it's the same thing as a government tyranny working over us, because it's in control of the natural processes, in control of your body, in control of your mind, ultimately. So this is a state, it says, as the soul say. You feel sorry, you don't know what to do, you feel dependent, you feel like are powerless. And so if I'm trying to empower people, if I'm trying to help them become independent, I'm going to try to help them know what foods they can eat and how encourage them to find out what foods they can eat and what medicines they could take throughout all the different options that exist, including the medicine that's been used for thousands of years, natural medicine, which is and should be the mainstream medicine, not the alternative medicine. It's always has been the traditional, most used medicine, and it's what people even resort to in most sorry states if the government doesn't step in and say, oh, well, take this, or you must get vaccinated. Okay, so this is what we have here as the ultimatum, is do you choose the government or do you choose nature? This is your choice. Now you have the time to decide which one will you choose, because if you choose government, you know it's only going to get bigger, it's only going to get worse. But if you choose more toward nature, at least you can do is limit the government or lower its control over our lives. But if you want complete freedom and true prosperity, we move toward a state of nature itself, where there is no government, because natural law can manifest in its works and we can live coexistent with one another with no belief of statism, the primary cause of all the harm in the world, the most dangerous superstition. Again, ingrained within our society for hundreds of thousands of years, and you see how schools have made this so powerfully manipulative. Quote, reading is to the mind what exercising is to the body. A quote by Richard Steele. So, you don't want to read all these quotes. Well, I'm sorry, but we learn a lot from this. We learn a lot from learning and reading about articles on the web, even about our health. You have this power called the internet, and using search engines. I mean, use it to your power that you can. But I feel like a lot of people are not, and they're just taking what is given to them and what shines out to them, what is trending, but they're not actively looking for it themselves, because there's a difference from just receiving it compared to actively looking out for it yourselves. So are you using the mind to actively look out, or are you just having the mind just sit back and do nothing? And instead of you reading, it's all just reading you, because it just knows what you're just going to fall to every time. They know what you're going to just watch because it's on the trending page. They know that if it's on the trending page, you'll watch it. So they understand people at a level to where they can understand human patterns, where they can control many masses of people, because they all react the same way, they all do the same things, they all go toward the same things. So what are you attracting? Are you attracting the same thing that everybody else is attracting, which is why there is no change? Are you attracting what the elites want you to attract? Then you have to question that, because that's how you're going to self-control your life. Remember, this is all about using our nature that we have here and taking action upon the knowledge that we know is innately true. So you have this quote, all tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent, to not do anything, to just sit back and let it all happen, watch, let the media just feed it up to them, give them their daily fear, and they'll be on with their ways. This is not the system that works with nature. The system that works with nature is we educate ourselves. We choose what information we want. We have choices, by the way, and not just all the same media companies owned by all the same corporations and all the same people. Okay, you know we're in trouble when you look at all these aspects and you take it into the greater outlook of society. Okay, any one of these aspects you look at and you say, that's a problem, then you know we are actually in a big, much bigger problem because it's been existent for all this time. Okay, and so if you look at statism, it's been existent for all this time, so long, in fact, that to actually gain a foothold of ourselves and to get rid of statism, it's going to take a transformative process. It's going to take steps to get there. So that's why we start by representing. We start by reasoning, by understanding, by simply getting our voices out there and encouraging voices to get out there. And before we educate and then get the information out there and our recommendations out there, and then we actually start doing stuff as it starts to naturally manifest because of our beliefs, because of what we stand for. So it's exactly that, and it's not silence when we are standing up, when we are speaking out, and not necessarily even doing any actions, because just simply by changing the mind, we're changing our actions, like I said. So by talking with one another, you're not silent. By being with one another, you're not silent. By expressing yourself through art and creativity, you're not silent. Okay, but you're silent if you aren't addressing the problems that are in the sight. The elephant in the room, which is clearly statism, which is rampant everywhere, the world's largest religion, many like to call it, because everybody believes blindly. They're not thinking critically. They're not questioning the status quo. So how could they be an innovator themselves? How could they find that driving passion themselves alone, regardless of anything else? Okay, so this is a transformative process not only for the world, but for yourself. Thank you for watching this video. Feel free to subscribe, like, and do whatever you wish. It's up to you. You are free in this life, and if you want to know how to change the world truly, please, I encourage you to check out my website, INNATE.1. It's here for all of us, actually. It's not my website. It is my website, but it isn't. It's here for us all. We're all messengers. We're all fellow human beings. Let's change the world truly, and we can do it with INNATE.1. Nature's the answer.